hosting is nothing but your you can say execution context. So let me just draw something for you, like that will give you an idea, like why actually this kind of phenomena, or like why this thing actually happens. Let me just remove this particular previous canvas. So yes, so let's assume like this is kind of execution context. Okay, when I say like whenever JavaScript gets the code, it will create an execution context to execute that piece of code. And what happens actually, for example, let's say this is my you can say kind of a container. Assume it like is that as a execution context. We can call this as a execution context. Now in this, there are two parts in the way like which JavaScript executes the code. So for example, in the first part, we will allocate the memory to each and every variable. So we can call this as the memory phase. And second phase is nothing but the code execution phase. So this phase, memory phase, this is very much crucial because let's say like let's assume this is my code where a equals to 12, and I'm doing some console log before you can say this variable declaration and definition. So here if I go and if I now check the value of a, that would be undefined because JavaScript stores, you can say, undefined for variables initially in your memory. And whenever like it will come to the code execution phase and it will see, okay, on line number 2, I have to update a to 12. It will just update the value of a to 12 in the memory. It will happen in, you can say, code execution phase when we will reach to this particular line. So if I will again console it after this particular line, it will give me the result as well. So now, moreover, we can see this is also called as hoisting, but again, it is occurring or it is coming up because of the way JavaScript executes code. Now, if I have to tell you about the functions as well, so functions are also hoisting, but I would say, moreover, functions gets their entire definition. So if I just let's assume like there is some function foo, okay, and there's so whenever I will declare that function will get their entire definition in memory phase itself. So even if you call before, you can say the declaration or definition, then also like it will be able to perform, you can say the exact functionality.
Okay, got it. Okay. And what can you know what is scoring in JavaScript?
Yeah. So currying is just a kind of, you can say again a way, the way you call the function. Now, why it is very much useful? Again, deep behind the scenes, like you can see, let's say I have some function called as sum, which is taking multiple parameters like one, two, three, and this will just return simply the result to me as 6. But currying, as I said, like it's just a way to call the functions with your partial arguments, or like with the way you want to give the arguments. So it gives you a flexibility. So the same function can be called up like this. I can say 2, and then this will still give me the same result because I am still processing the arguments. So until and unless we are done with the arguments or base condition, this will be helping us in a dynamic way where we, let's assume like there is some response or some data is coming up from somewhere, and I don't know like how much arguments still there would be. So this kind of technique will be very much useful in that way. So you can see here, like we have converted, or we are calling this function now with one parameter, with argument, with one argument at a time, not parameter.
Okay. Yeah. So can you tell me? Let's have some React questions. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh, uh, so do you know how does JSX handle expression and statements?
Okay, are you asking about like how? Because browser obviously don't know JSX or this React.
Yes,
So
yes,
are you
yes.
asking
Yeah,
that part?
yeah, yeah. Correct.
Okay. So obviously it's very much crucial, like how we process, like how we give the data to the browser. But again, uh, browsers only understand one thing, that is ES5, not your ES6. Nothing more than ES5. The only compatible version with your browsers is ES5. When I say ES5, it's nothing but your, even we can say the version that was introduced in 2009 of JavaScript, and now after 2015 we are getting updates every year. But coming back to this particular part, if JavaScript understood only the compatible version, which is ES5, which is running on all the browsers, then how should things should be processed? So let's come back to the React part itself. So now this JSX is just a syntactic sugar. It's nothing else. So it seems like it's a kind of JavaScript and HTML code, but no, like it's just a syntactic sugar. Under the hood, there's someone called as Babel, a special type of compiler, you can say, or a transpiler, which is just converting this code to compatible code so that like browsers can execute. Because at the end of the day, every component is a plain JavaScript
What is
function.
the
It's nothing else.
what can you give me some of the compiler name you told compiler?
Yeah, yeah, Babel.
Okay.
And also one more thing, as I said, like this is a syntactic sugar. I can still write something like this, React, because we have something like this React.create element. And what type of element you want to create? Let's assume I want to create a div. So give it a div. And then do we have any properties like class name, ID, or anything associated with that? If not, let's move ahead. And then what about their childs? So let's say if it's only displaying the hello world, then you will provide it like this. But if it is having further more childs, it will again create a kind of structure like this. So moreover, you will deeply nested through that object. But as you can see, this is not a kind of good syntax, because as a developer, I want to transition with very smooth development. I can still achieve the same thing with this React.create element, but yes, we have a kind of wrapper, I would say, or the syntactic sugar called as JSX. And under the hood, this is how things are processing.
Okay, fine, got it. Okay. So what are the hooks you have used?
Okay, I have majorly used use state, use effect, and then use memo, use callback. There's one more interesting thing that I used, even it was in Red Hat itself. So to make our component pure, I was using React.memo, and this was something like I was optimizing the, you can say, performance of the web application. It was creating some issues for me at that moment. So this all hooks are I have used. React memo obviously it's just a different thing, but yes, coming back to this use memo, use callback, use effect, use state, use ref, and then
Okay.
use you can say layout. This use layout effect. There's one more thing.
When you will use
So
this use layout effect?
okay, yeah. So basically, if you can see, use effect is something which is doing your work after your DOM is completed, like or your things are painted on the screen. So that's
Okay.
why it's also said like we are handling the side effects in our use effects. Side effects, something like you are making an API call, and right now we know like API calls will give me the result after a specific amount of time. So till that point, I will not stop my you can say view, or I will not block my view for that particular point. So whatever will be there will be painted on the DOM. When I say painted, obviously there is a process for this. But again, coming back to this paint side, let's assume in layman terms, like it's nothing but the view that will be created for the user, and then whatever would be there in the use effect that will get executed. Now coming back to the use layout, it's not like that. It's synchronous. When I say it's synchronous, moreover, before doing anything on the DOM, before getting results on the DOM, it will first try to do whatever logic or piece of code we have written in use layout effect. It will execute that as well, and that will also be your part of the final result that will be painted on the DOM.
Okay.
So it's just like something is going
Got
on
it.
before your DOM painting,
Got it.
like
Got it.
whatever you are getting view.
Okay.
Before that only, like you are including your logic.
Okay. How does use reducer differ from use state?
Okay, so use reducer, see, to be honest, like if I have to use reducer, it's somewhat like I would say for complex situations, and also it's very useful when you are creating multiple states in your single component. So when I say this thing, actually, your use reducer is somewhat, I would say, similar to the working of this particular, you can say, concepts of letters, not the exact thing I would say, but yes, the logic or the thoughts remains the same, where you have a reducer, like basically on matching of your case, or the particular, you can say, triggered action, we will call a specific, you can say, function or pure function, you can say, to be honest, or like a reducer. And then this will further initialize the state, update the state. So to handle complex situations, it's very useful to use a single hook called as use reducer, instead of creating multiple states using use state and then handling them.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell me what is the significance of keys in the list?
Yeah. Okay. Let's take an example. Because I would say like keys are very much important. To be honest, like it's as a developer, we should note keys are very important because React is already doing something behind the scenes to optimize the performance. Like when I come up on this particular part, now what happens actually on this, you can say list. Let's assume like I have one array having elements A and B. These are my two elements, and suddenly I added one more element. Assume it like it's a to do. I am adding A, B, and suddenly I added one more element called as D on top of this. So now my new list would be D, A, and then B. Now, how actually React re-renders the things or recreates entire thing? Because obviously React doesn't do anything. React DOM is doing dealing with the actual DOM, but React still evaluates your component and it will tell to the in the commit phase to the React DOM like what we have to re-render, like what we have to recreate. So in our case here, we can see D is something new, which should be recreated. Other two things are similar. We don't have to recreate and re-render basically. But at this point, let's assume like how actually React differentiates, it's with the help of keys. And by default, if you're not providing any key, React use key is equals to index. And why index? Because assume it like this is an array of elements or like array of you can say uh, the DOM like your DOM elements or the nodes that you will be pointing it out. Or this elements would be something like this. First, this was my array A comma B, and then now my array is like this D, A, and B. These three elements, and I can see this is my zero index. So key would be indexed by default if you're not providing any key. Let's say I missed out as a developer this particular key. React is smart enough. They will associate IDX like index of your array element itself. So this the index of key for this A would be zero, for B would be one. But then, as I said, like the drawback would be when now I will when this newly added element will be there, React will try to compare both the arrays with the help of key itself. And it will find out on zero index, I was having A, but I can see there is some new thing coming up. So what React will do basically, it will try to recreate and do re-rendering and everything, every process right from scratch, which is wrong. Again, it will come to A. It will see, okay, A, okay, on one index I was having something called as B, but now I have something A, which is not similar. So it will again do processing and everything for A as well. Same is true for B as well. So to avoid such scenarios, we can use key as the unique values, so that like React can differentiate between your siblings, you can say, or between your elements, and then they can render that efficiently.
Okay.
That's the advantage of
Okay,
keys.
got it. So what is React reconciliation?
Okay. So first of all, like React works on the principle of something called as diffing algorithm. And when I say this thing, by default, it's not like we are directly, as I said, like React is not dealing directly with the actual DOM. React is something like which is evaluating your components, and there's in between a renderer called as React DOM. This renderer can be React Native as well for mobile applications, but for your web applications, the renderer is React DOM, and then this will be kind of given to the actual DOM by React DOM, and there are various methods of like present in React DOM. Now, coming back to this particular part, if React is not directly dealing with the actual DOM, what actually React is doing for the first time, whenever your DOM or like whatever your view is there on the UI for the first time, a copy of that actual DOM will be saved. It is called as virtual DOM. It's not the exact same actual DOM, but it's a copy of that. So let's assume this is my app component, this is my A component, or this is my B component, something like this. And this is the copy that like we are storing in memory, that is called as virtual DOM, the first copy of your actual DOM. But now next time, whenever something updates, let's say there is something, a new component or new element is getting appended to B, which is called as C. Now, if I have to add this particular element C, basically what will happen, like React will again try to create a new image, you can say basically, or a new, you can say entire structure, and it will find out, okay, entire things remain same, only the thing that is changed is this particular element or a new thing is added is C. So basically, virtual DOM is nothing but a plain JavaScript object, and assume it like we are comparing two JavaScript objects. And here I come to know like C is the only thing that is changed or that is added. So what will happen? Like we are comparing two virtual DOM copies, or the newly created copy and the old copy, and that's why this is called as diffing algorithm, where you are comparing two particular copies, based on the changes, you will sync your changes to the actual DOM. The sync process is called as reconciliation.
Okay. So, what is difference between development and production build in React?
Okay, so to be honest, like production build is quite efficient, I would say, and it's very lightweight, and it will remove unnecessary things that we use. Like your dev dependencies has been gone. Apart from this, like it's as I said, like it's very lightweight because now we are going towards the environment which will be served to the user. So there might be unnecessary things like comments, so many things which is not useful for your, you can say, this environment. The only thing that we care is just to like give a proper working application to the user. Coming back to the development side, we have the build size or the bundle size is very much there in terms of development, you can say, more,
Okay.
and as compared to production it's very less. When I
Okay.
say it's less,
Got
because
it.
you
Got
are
it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
including a
How,
good amount of
okay.
things.
How do you prevent unnecessary re-renders in React?
Okay, one thing is to first always, like if you are feeling like your component is getting re-rendered again and again, and that is unnecessary, because obviously React works on the principles of re-renders. But if any component is behaving out of your zone, or which is re-rendering even though you don't want, so at that moment, first thing I will do will be wrapping it up using something called as React.memo, which helps you to make components pure. So React.memo, it's something similar to the concept of your function where your props are same, your parameters are same, the result would be same input, same output. So same props, same JSONs. But then this React memo actually fails at a point where your you can say references are objects, or your functions, or you can say arrays, because it will think of like every time a new reference has been created and I should trigger a re-render. So in that case, this React.memo will fail. So to avoid such scenarios, we can always use something like use memo, use callback to wrap up our functions. Now both of them have their own use case. Like use memo is used when a function is returning a value and we are interested in that memoized value.
Okay.
So
Got
we
it.
will
Yeah.
use memo. But a
Okay.
function which is just doing something for you, for that we will use callback.
Okay. So, have you used React Profiler anytime?
Yeah, I have used, and to be honest, like I was trying something, as I said, like previously in Reddit. So, moreover, I came to know for the first time, like it's used on, like it should, the React version should be more than React 16.8, you can see, and then only this profiler works. And with the help of this, like you can get an idea like how your things are working. So you can see like which component is getting re-rendered, like where you can reduce the time period, who re-rendered this particular component. Entire information is with you with the help of this profiler. Again, it comes up from the extension React Dev Tools. You have two things, components and profiler. So we can always record things, and we can check various things like flame graph and everything, like how things are working, how components are rendering.
Okay.
I was also using some
Okay.
other library as well,
Have
but
you
yes.
have you
Uh,
faced any challenges of using async function in use effect?
Okay, let me come up on that. Actually, I was telling you I was also using one more library called as Why Did You Render?
Okay.
So that actually application that I am telling you, that particular application was not using the updated React version. So it was causing me issue for using that profiler stuff for this entire React dev tools. I was not able to install them. So I was using this thing, but then I upgraded the version of React to just make it efficient. Now coming back to your this question, like about a sync issue you are saying in use effect, right?
Uh-huh.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like first of all, like use effect, as I said, like uh, you can, like you have to be very much aware what you are doing inside the use effect, and majorly, again coming up to the syntax as well, you should be very much like if you are writing everything inside your use effect, it should be much more efficient what you are trying to do, because as I said, like it's a side effect. Whatever things like the things should be done prior to whatever like you are deciding to call. So side effects are something like which should be called at the end. And if you're trying to block, or if you're not writing things properly, then this particular thing will not be like proper. And inside use effect itself, if sometimes like we can come up to this particular problem where it says like this is wrong, we are not expecting this thing with the use effect, like
Okay.
error will be thrown.
Okay. what happen when you update state inside render method?
Okay. When we update state in render method,
Yeah,
so I think moreover this you are going in class components, right?
yeah, yeah.
So in functional components nowadays we just have return, but in
Okay,
class components inside render we have something called as return. So if I have to come back on this point, see if you're updating state in render, that will be a totally infinite problem you can say for you,
okay,
because what you are doing first, you are rendering the elements that are still not on the screen, and suddenly you are again updating something which is just you are telling me to re-render. Again, I will come up, I will follow your path. Again, I will do the same thing, and again, I will saw like there is a state update. So
okay,
every time if you're doing such things which is not proper according to the concepts of React, you
okay.
can say this can harm your entire application. So how your component renders, this is very much efficient. We
Got it.
should have this hooks on the top of our components, and where we are redefining it, or like where we are updating, that is also very much important according to the best practices and how your component re-renders. Even I have seen like where people used to update the state unnecessary inside use effect. Like if like I'm not saying like this is wrong, but if there is a case, then only like we should do such things. Otherwise, updating the state almost triggers a re-render.
Okay, got it. Got it. Uh, what are the common causes of memory leak in React application?
Okay, one of them would be I would say something which is major inside use effect. Like we write the use effect, we write our logic, but what about like when my component will unmount? We never think of that situation. So in my use effect, what I can do, like let's assume like this is my use effect, and this is the empty dependency, or let's say there is some dependency inside this array, and suddenly I have entire logic here. But when my component unmounts, I've seen like people don't remove the timers, event listeners, or various other things which are still used inside your components, which is of no use once your component is unmount. One such good thing would be like, let's say I'm using one abort controller to abort an API once my component unmounts, and this makes sense because once you are out of your component, you should not make any API call within that component, because you don't want any data now. So we can use something like this to avoid this situation, and this will prevent you from the memory leaks. And this is one of the common things which as a developer we should note, like we should write something here, then whatever you want to clear, let's say there is some event listener I want to clear,
Hmm.
I should remove that event listener, and whatever I'm doing, if I'm removing the timeouts or like timers, you can say, if I'm clearing it out, I should do it here. So this
Okay,
means basically when your component unmounts, or whenever we are out of scope, we will just do this thing, and then we will go out of
okay,
this
fine,
particular
fine,
component.
fine. How do you like debounce or throttle a search input in React?
Okay. So to be honest, like the bounce and throttle seems to be same, but there is a minute difference. So let's take one small example here. So let's say like I have so basically we can use various Lodash method. That's not an issue. We have a library like Lodash, but even we can implement our own version of debounce and throttling. That's not an issue. But as I am interested in this concept, as I would say, let's assume like my mother is preparing something for the guest. Like our my in my home, my guests are visiting today at evening, and my mother is preparing some you can say cake. And assume it like what will happen. Like now, let's assume first the debouncing part. Now, for the first thing, let's say I asked to my mom, like, I want this cake. So this is me, and then I'm asking to my mom, like, I want the cake. So if you can give me this cake, so she will be obviously saying like, this is for the guest, not for you. But then coming to this point, she makes a deal, or she promised me, like after 1 hour, if you don't ask me, after 1 hour I will give you. So now it is 10:29 a.m. So at 11:29, I will automatically come to you, and I will give you the cake. Okay, but let's say within half an hour at 11, I'm asking again for the cake. Here, this is a deal breaker. What I am doing, I'm calling this particular for the cake to my mother again and again. So what will happen actually within this half an hour? You can say again. My mother would say now it's an 11 a.m. and our deal was like you will ask me the cake at 11:29, but again you are asking me right now at 11 a.m. So from here on, again we will add 1 hour of timer, and then I will give you the cake at 12 a.m. So this is the same way what happens with your input box as well. Until and unless you are typing, I will clear out that timer, and then what I will be doing, I will be kind of reinitializing the timer again. So let's say if it's of 500 milliseconds and you are making some call to that input box, what I will do, my primary focus would be, first I will check like whether any timer ID exists or not. When I say this timer ID, your set timeouts returns a unique ID every time, which will help you to understand like whether a timer has been added or not. So if any timer ID already exists, then I can kind of clear it out. If not, then I will, you can say set out, like I will call this set timeout, and inside this whatever function you have provided me in the debounce function, I will call that, and whatever delay you have given me in the debounce, I will add this in the your set timeout, you can say, and this will be equals to your timer ID. So this is somewhat you are debouncing.
Okay.
And as I said, like a difference is there with throttling. And we can see like there is a cooling period. I'm wasting my 30 minutes, and then again I am calling it after 1 hour. So instead, I would have not asked. I might have got everything in 1 hour. But here I can see if I'm calling, that previous time period is totally ignored, which is a kind of cold period. So until and unless you are typing, once you stop and we feel out the time period is over, then only like we will make a call for you. Otherwise, there is no chance to make a call. So this is how like your debouncing works. And whatever your on change function would be there, just add it inside the debounce. You can say
Okay.
it takes two things: function and the delay. So function would be your on change, whatever you want to give, handle change or
Okay.
whatever,
Got
and
it.
delay,
Got it.
let's say, of 1000. Yeah.
What is code
Should I
splitting?
tell you about throttling or
No, it's okay. Debouncing is fine. What about code splitting?
uh,
Do you
code
know?
splitting? You are
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, okay. Code splitting, I know actually. See, it's one of the techniques where you are kind of efficiently managing your browser, the code on the browser, I would say, because everything is not required right from the scratch to show the user. When I say such things, so obviously we know like whenever our web application comes into view, browsers make various network requests to get your part of your component or like this JavaScript and other total efficient resources like images, other things. When I come up on this part, when I say code splitting, in React actually we do code splitting with something called as React.lazy, and also you can achieve the same thing with Webpack as well. If you don't have any control with the Webpack, let's say you are creating something with CRA, then React.lazy is a good thing where you can lazily load your component. So, for example, let's assume like a scenario where I don't need component one, but I need the code for component two in this particular view, and loading the code or the calling that particular code of component one will not be useful. So at that moment, what I can do, I can lazily load component one, and I can only focus on my main thing, that is component two. But yes, whenever you will visit that component one, we will give you the code, and then you can render that efficiently. Instead of loading entire code at the same moment, we are splitting it out. That's why it's called as code splitting. You are not bringing the entire all code of your components, everything to me. Instead, we are splitting it according to our logic.